When people hear the word Titanic, their minds drift instantly to the cold North Atlantic, to the outline of a ship once called unsinkable, to a night lit only by distress flares and fading hope. But more than a century later, that name has surfaced again. This time not as tragedy, but as ambition. A new vessel, engineered with 21st century precision and powered by the dream of rewriting history, has been announced. Titanic. The plan sounds almost mythical. A full-scale recreation of the most famous ocean liner ever built, designed not as a museum or movie set, but as a working cruise ship capable of carrying passengers across oceans once more. Its cost, roughly $500 million. Its goal to let people step into the past without repeating it. Our story begins in Australia, in the mind of mining billionaire Clive Palmer. In 2012, exactly 100 years after the original Titanic's maiden voyage, Palmer revealed his intention to build a modern replica, a ship that would match the spirit and grandeur of the original, but use today's technology to guarantee safety. "We're not building a museum piece," Palmer told reporters. "We're building the ship people should have had in 1912. For the global press, it was a headline that sounded too bold to be real. Could anyone truly rebuild the Titanic? And if they did, would people actually sail on it? To understand why the idea captured so many imaginations, you have to remember what the original Titanic represented. In 1912, it was more than a ship. It was a statement about human progress, about the belief that technology had finally tamed nature. The tragedy that followed turned that confidence into caution. For more than a century, the wreck on the ocean floor stood as a warning. Yet Palmer's project seemed to say something new, that we can honor history without being haunted by it. Blueprints for Titanic II showed a vessel nearly identical in length, height, and layout to its ancestor. About 269 meters long, 28 meters wide, with 9 decks, grand staircases, Turkish baths, first-class lounges, and even lifeboats designed to blend seamlessly into the early 1900s aesthetic. Every dining chair, every light fixture, every paneled wall was planned to echo the Edwardian original. But hidden beneath that nostalgia were systems the old ship never had: digital navigation, satellite communication, radar, sonar, and state-of-the-art safety technology capable of surviving conditions the 1912 ship never could. In concept videos, computer-generated images glide across screens, a sparkling white hull with the same 4 iconic funnels, though only 3 functional this time, cutting through modern waters. It's both hauntingly familiar and shockingly new, as if the ghost of history has been rebuilt from steel and software. Naval architects were tasked with the impossible: keep the soul of the past intact, while integrating every modern regulation of the International Maritime Organization. That meant higher freeboard, thicker hull plating, advanced ballast systems, and full digital redundancy. The result, on paper, is a hybrid between nostalgia and innovation. A museum wrapped around a cutting-edge cruise liner. The bridge would be completely modernized: touchscreen controls, GPS integration, and automated stability systems invisible to passengers, but constantly active beneath the polished brass and mahogany. The ship's engine layout also marks a fundamental shift from the coal-powered triple expansion engines of 1912 to a diesel-electric propulsion system driving azimuth thrusters, more efficient, cleaner, and vastly more maneuverable. And yet, what fascinates most people is not the engineering, it's the emotion. The idea of walking the same decks, sleeping in the same shaped cabins, dining under the same chandeliers, without the shadow of doom, feels almost cinematic. One proposed itinerary even mirrored the original route: Southampton to New York. "We're giving history a second chance," Palmer said during the early design reveal. But history, as always, resists neat repetition. From the moment the announcement hit international media, debates began. Some called it a brilliant tribute, others a tone-deaf stunt. Titanic survivors' descendants voiced mixed feelings: respect for remembrance, concern about commercialization. On social media, the idea divided audiences. Would you board a ship called Titanic II? Behind the scenes, a team of engineers in Finland and China set to work translating the dream into steel. The shipyard selected was CSC Jinling Shipyard in Nanjing, a facility capable of producing massive ocean vessels under the supervision of Deltamarin, a Finnish design firm known for high-tech cruise engineering. In 2013, early hull plans were reportedly completed, safety modeling initiated, and construction was slated to begin. Then silence. Financing delays, shifting priorities, and global economic turbulence slowed the project. By 2015, many assumed Titanic II was nothing more than a public relations ghost ship, but Palmer resurfaced again in 2018, insisting the project was alive, refunded, and moving forward. "It will sail," he said. "It will happen. Titanic's second will be real, for a world obsessed with nostalgia and spectacle." Those words reignited curiosity. If finished, Titanic II wouldn't just be a ship, It would be the most symbolic cruise vessel in modern history, a floating conversation between past and present. But building such a symbol comes with technical and emotional weight. Modern safety standards demand lifeboat capacity for everyone on board, reinforced watertight compartments, full fire suppression systems, and emergency power redundancy. Every single feature had to comply with SOLAS 2020 regulations, something the original Titanic could never have imagined. That's the paradox at the heart of the project. How do you recreate the most infamous failure in maritime engineering as a celebration of progress? One of the lead designers put it simply: the point isn't to copy tragedy, it's to prove that what failed once can now succeed. In the following sections, we'll trace how that proof took shape, through design evolution, controversies, cultural reactions, and what the ship represents for a world still haunted by the name Titanic. But first, imagine it: the silhouette of 4 towering funnels, glowing gold against an orange sunset, the sound of waves against steel, the faint echo of an orchestra rehearsing in the grand staircase hall. The Titanic has risen, not as a ghost but as an idea reborn in modern engineering. Inside the design offices of Deltamarine in Turku, Finland, teams of naval architects surrounded digital renderings that looked like they'd been lifted straight out of a history book. Only sharper, cleaner, reborn in pixels instead of pencil sketches. The Titanic II wasn't just a reconstruction, it was a resurrection of aesthetic memory. Every hallway, every staircase, every stateroom was modeled after archival blueprints of the 1912 original, right down to the moldings and fixtures. But while the decor whispered of Edwardian elegance, the infrastructure beneath it was distinctly 21st century. Modern fireproofing materials replaced old timber. Sprinkler systems, thermal sensors, and automated bulkhead doors were integrated invisibly into walls and ceilings. The design brief was simple, but paradoxical: recreate the feeling of 1912 without inheriting any of its vulnerabilities. The ship's interiors would be divided, like the original, into first, second, and third class accommodations. Yet in Titanic II, those distinctions would function less as barriers and more as curated experiences. Passengers booking a first-class ticket would step into an environment that looked and felt as if time had frozen: grand staircases with wrought iron balustrades, crystal chandeliers, mahogany paneled reading rooms, smoking lounges, and dining halls with live orchestras performing music from the early 1900s. The details mattered. Even the china patterns were replicas of the White Star Line originals, and staff uniforms were tailored to match historical photographs. But unlike 1912, when class dictated not just comfort but survival, Titanic I's design promised equality where it mattered most. All safety systems, evacuation points, and lifeboat access routes were shared. Whether a passenger chose a suite in first class or a simple cabin in third, every deck had redundant alarms, smoke sensors, and digital displays for emergency guidance. In interviews, one of the architects described the philosophy as romantic realism. He explained, "You want people to feel they're stepping into another era, but not into its risks." Second-class accommodations were planned to reflect the mid-range luxury of the early 20th century: rich woods, soft lighting, and shared social spaces that mixed nostalgia with modern comfort. Third class, once the most modest section of the Titanic, was reimagined entirely. In Titanic II, those cabins would be compact but refined. Private bathrooms, efficient layouts, comfortable bedding, and historically inspired design motifs. It was nostalgia without deprivation. For the ship's public spaces, the design team faced a unique challenge: how to balance authenticity with accessibility. The original Titanic's grand staircase, for instance, was stunning but never built for modern crowds or regulations. The new version had to include hidden lifts, reinforced steps, and glass safety barriers so that hundreds of people could explore without compromising structure or safety. The result was an environment designed to photograph beautifully but function seamlessly. A living museum wrapped around the conveniences of a modern cruise liner. Even the iconic promenade deck, once open to the cold Atlantic wind, was being reconstructed with retractable glass walls, allowing passengers to stroll in comfort, no matter the weather. Hidden beneath the romantic exterior, HVAC systems quietly maintained perfect climate control, something that would have been unimaginable in 1912. And yet, for all its luxury, Titanic II's greatest promise lies in what passengers won't see: its safety systems. Modern regulations require every new passenger ship to meet the SOLAS, Safety of Life at Sea standards, a global maritime framework created partly in response to the original Titanic disaster. That means this vessel, though dressed in nostalgia, would be among the safest ships afloat. Instead of riveted steel plates, Titanic II's hull would be constructed using welded, high-tensile steel reinforced with double-bottomed compartments and modern anti-corrosion coatings. Its watertight bulkheads would extend all the way to the main deck, unlike the 1912 version, which allowed water to spill over as the ship listed. Automatic doors could seal sections in seconds, controlled both manually and by computer. Power generation would come from diesel-electric engines connected to azimuth pods, massive propellers capable of rotating 360 degrees, providing superior steering control even in emergencies. Navigation would be handled by integrated bridge systems with radar, GPS, and satellite communications constantly feeding data to both crew and shore-based operations centers. If the original Titanic was the pinnacle of 20th century mechanical optimism, Titanic II aims to be the embodiment of 21st century digital safety. In a design review, one engineer summed it up perfectly. The old Titanic believed it couldn't fail. This one is built assuming anything can, and has to survive it. But not everyone is convinced that technology alone can erase the ghosts of history. Maritime historians have pointed out that the very name, Titanic, carries emotional gravity. It's both a brand and a burden. For every potential passenger thrilled at the idea of walking the same decks, another sees it as tempting fate. Even so, the project's planners insist it's about respect, not repetition. They emphasize education, preservation, and experience. One of the proposed features of the ship would be an onboard museum, an interactive exhibition chronicling not only the story of the original Titanic, but the evolution of maritime safety afterward. Visitors could view recovered artifacts, digital reconstructions of the 1912 voyage, and personal stories of those who lived through it. The irony, of course, is that Titanic's greatest strength may also be its greatest challenge, walking the line between tribute and tourism. On the financial side, the $500 million budget isn't just for nostalgia. The vessel is expected to carry around 400 passengers and 900 crew, roughly the same as its predecessor, but with all the infrastructure of a modern cruise liner. Restaurants, theaters, fitness centers, spas, and Wi-Fi enabled lounges. Yet, despite all those additions, the designers insist that the ship's soul remains intact. Clive Palmer himself once said during a promotional interview, "When people step aboard, I want them to feel awe, not irony." That sense of awe is what keeps the project alive, even through delays and doubt. It's what fuels the fascination of millions who track the updates online, hoping to one day book a voyage not just on another ship, but on the ship reborn. And yet, beneath the polished press releases and artist renderings lies a deeper question: why rebuild Titanic at all? Is it nostalgia, tribute, or something more primal? A desire to rewrite a story that ended too soon. For the engineers, it's a challenge of skill. For investors, it's a gamble on spectacle. But for the public, it's emotion. The Titanic's legend isn't just about disaster, it's about dreams. Dreams of progress, beauty, and human ambition that soared too close to perfection. To rebuild it is to reclaim that dream, not erase its ending. As work continues, Titanic II remains one of the most ambitious, controversial, and emotionally charged ship projects of the 21st century. A floating paradox, half memory, half miracle. Somewhere in a design lab illuminated by blue monitor light, a digital rendering of the Titanic II glides endlessly across a simulated ocean. And in that motion, code replacing coal, precision replacing presumption. You can almost hear history whisper, maybe this time, it'll make it. By the late 2010s, the Titanic II project had become something larger than a ship. It had become a global question mark. Every new announcement drew millions of views. Every new render stirred fresh debate. Was this the most daring tribute to maritime history ever attempted, or the most audacious act of historical déjà vu? As new details surfaced, the project's engineering ambitions grew clearer. The hull was planned to be nearly identical in size to the original, about 82 feet long and weighing 56,000 gross tons. But inside, the systems were radically different. Modern ships are built around redundancy: twin engine rooms, twin generators, twin control networks. The Titanic II would adopt that philosophy completely. The vessel's designers claimed it could remain fully operational even if multiple systems failed. Each section would have independent power distribution, water, tight compartments with auto, sealing doors, and electronic sensors capable of detecting the smallest changes in pressure or temperature. One engineer working on the safety simulations explained, "The difference between 1912 and now is information. The original Titanic didn't know what it didn't know. This one sees, hears, and reacts in milliseconds." The propulsion design alone was a marvel. Instead of massive steam pistons and coal furnaces, Titanic II's movement would come from electric propulsion motors powered by diesel generators. The azimuth thrusters could rotate 360 degrees, allowing the ship to move sideways, pivot on its axis, and maneuver into ports with surgical precision. It's easy to imagine where stokers once shoveled coal into roaring furnaces. Now computers hum quietly, monitoring every rotation, every vibration. Safety wasn't the only area transformed, comfort was too. The Titanic II promised modern stabilization systems that would reduce roll, vibration, and motion, even in rough weather. The original Titanic's passengers often felt the sway of the Atlantic. On Titanic II, motion sensors and hydraulic fins would counterbalance every movement, making the ship glide almost silently through waves. But despite these advancements, skeptics questioned whether any technology could overcome the symbolic weight of the name, Titanic. In public forums, critics argued that calling it Titanic II risked inviting comparison to one of history's greatest tragedies. Others believed the very act of building it was a kind of poetic defiance, a statement that fear should never bury progress. At a maritime conference in 2019, a naval historian commented, "Titanic II isn't a ship, it's an argument. It challenges how we deal with memory. Do we honor the past by leaving it untouched, or by daring to engage with it again?" The cultural fascination with Titanic runs deep. Since the 1985 discovery of the wreck by Robert Ballard, the ship has existed in two forms, one of memory and one of myth. Movies, documentaries, books, exhibitions, each retelling reignited the story. So when Clive Palmer announced his project, the idea tapped into something collective, a yearning to turn sorrow into triumph. For those involved in the engineering, that mission was deeply personal. Delta Marine's team wasn't just copying blueprints, they were decoding a legend. They studied shipbuilding records, deck plans, and even photographs of furniture and wall panels. Every detail had to feel authentic without violating modern safety codes. For example, the original Titanic's grand staircase was made of oak and wrought iron, materials that today would fail fire regulations. The new design uses aluminum alloys and flame retardant coatings that mimic wood grain so perfectly that most visitors would never know the difference. In the dining rooms, old-world luxury meets invisible modernity. Beneath the polished oak tables are induction coils and ventilation systems designed to quietly maintain temperature and air quality. Even the chandeliers, faithful replicas of those that once glittered above the first-class diners, use LED lighting integrated into the ship's emergency power grid. Every nostalgic touch hides a layer of technology. For the project's creators, this blending of eras isn't just a marketing strategy, it's a statement. Palmer once told a press conference, "People think Titanic II is about the past. It's actually about the future, how far we've come since then, and how much safer we are now." But while his words inspired fascination, they also sparked controversy. Critics accused Palmer of exploiting tragedy for publicity, while others dismissed the project as impractical fantasy. Financial analysts questioned whether there was a market for a ship built to resemble a century-old liner when modern cruise companies were investing in floating megacities with roller coasters, zip lines, and robotic bartenders. And yet, interest didn't fade. If anything, the skepticism fueled the mystique. Titanic II trended repeatedly on social media. Concept videos on YouTube accumulated millions of views. Model makers, maritime fans, and history buffs debated the tiniest details. Online, the color of the hull, the design of the funnels, the tone of the ship's whistle. It was as if the entire world wanted to see whether the impossible could actually happen again. In forums, some people wrote emotional messages. "My great-grandfather was on the original. I'd sail on Titanic II in his memory." Others were bluntly fearful. "I wouldn't step foot on that ship even if it paid me." That split sentiment, half awe, half apprehension, became the ship's defining feature long before its keel ever touched water. From a psychological perspective, experts called it the Titanic paradox. The same name that draws people in also makes them hesitate. It symbolizes both human greatness and human vulnerability in one breath. Still, the project moved ahead, with its design phase finalized and sea trials projected for the mid-2020s. Blue Star Line, the company created by Palmer, released new statements confirming that Titanic II would follow the original ship's maiden route, from Southampton to New York, before embarking on global voyages. That single announcement reignited headlines around the world. Reporters asked, would anyone dare to book a ticket for a ship named after the most infamous voyage in maritime history? The answer, according to Blue Star Line, was yes. Thousands of people had already registered interest. Some saw it as a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to rewrite history. Others wanted to walk through a living replica of the most legendary ship ever built. Behind the spectacle, the logistics were monumental. The ship's construction required coordination between Australian financiers, European designers, and Chinese shipbuilders, all under international oversight. Each part of the ship's system had to pass maritime certifications from multiple countries, a process far more complex than in 1912. If successful, Titanic II would not only make history, it could redefine how we remember it. At the heart of the project lies an undeniable emotion: redemption. The original Titanic represented both human brilliance and human error. Its sequel, if it ever sails, would represent learning, an act of respect disguised as innovation. For one maritime architect, that's exactly the point. "We're not just rebuilding a ship," he said softly. "We're finishing a journey that never ended." As the story of Titanic VII spread across continents, news outlets began treating it as more than a maritime curiosity. It became a global conversation about memory, ambition, and risk. For some, the project represented human resilience, the idea that we could confront tragedy not with fear but with mastery. For others, it felt like provocation, a challenge to destiny. Headlines appeared everywhere. "Titanic reborn. Would you sail on history's most cursed ship?" "The 500 million gamble." Television anchors debated it, talk shows joked about it. The name, Titanic II, carried a weight that no other cruise vessel in the world could match. At universities, cultural theorists dissected it. One professor described it as our era's monument to obsession, proof that the past still commands the future. Another called it the ultimate metaphor for human ego, trying to fix a century-old scar by painting it gold. But public fascination wasn't cynical alone. Many saw poetry in the project, the dream that something beautiful could rise again from the depths. The ship promised not only to honor those who perished in 1912, but to demonstrate that technology and compassion had evolved. In online forums and fan groups, artists began creating digital renders of what life aboard Titanic might look like: families dining under glowing chandeliers, couples strolling on the promenade beneath the stars, orchestras playing in echoing ballrooms. These images carried a sense of reverence, a wish to experience the glamour of the past without its fatal flaws. Yet for every admirer, there was a critic. Survivors' descendants questioned whether the name should ever sail again. Some felt it commodified grief, turning history's most solemn maritime disaster into spectacle. "We remember the Titanic because of the lives lost, not the ship itself," one relative wrote in an open letter. Rebuilding it for tourism risks forgetting that distinction. Blue Star Line countered those concerns with assurances of respect. Memorial spaces were planned on board, quiet exhibits and reflection areas telling the true story of the 1912 voyage, its heroes and its victims. The goal, they insisted, wasn't entertainment, but education through experience. Still, the world remained divided. The very paradox of Titanic Hawaii, both reverent and controversial, kept it in headlines year after year. Even people who claimed to disapprove found themselves captivated by renderings of its gleaming decks. Culturally, the timing couldn't have been more significant. Society was entering an age of reconstruction and nostalgia, reviving vintage cars, classic fashion, even lost technologies. Titanic II fit perfectly into that zeitgeist, a promise to rebuild what once seemed gone forever. In Australia, Clive Palmer doubled down on his vision. He appeared on television interviews, smiling at skeptical questions. "People said man would never fly again after the Hindenburg," he told one reporter. "But we did. Humanity learns, and that's what this ship stands for, learning." His words resonated. For all the cynicism surrounding billionaires, there was something undeniably human about trying to rewrite a tragedy into triumph. It spoke to a deeper longing, the same impulse that drives explorers back to Everest after avalanches or divers to shipwrecks after storms. Yet engineering a legend is harder than announcing one. As 2020 approached, the world shifted under the weight of new challenges. Global logistics tightened, shipyards faced delays, and financial complexities multiplied. The pandemic halted almost every major maritime project. Construction on Titanic II slowed to a crawl. Still, the vision refused to sink. Blue Star Line released periodic updates reaffirming their commitment to completion. Palmer repeated his mantra, "Titanic II will sail." Each new statement revived interest. Documentaries, podcasts, and YouTube creators examined every aspect of the project, from the economics to the ethics. Footage of the original Titanic wreck juxtaposed with renderings of Titanic VII made for hauntingly beautiful storytelling. In a single frame, you could see humanity's past and its persistence intertwined. Behind the scenes, maritime analysts debated the business model. Would Titanic II operate as a traditional cruise ship, or as a limited historical voyage? The answer leaned toward the latter. The first official journey was planned to mirror Titanic's intended route, Southampton to New York, serving as both a symbolic crossing and a memorial event. Afterward, the ship would embark on worldwide cruises, retracing routes from the early 20th century, but under modern comfort and safety standards. Demand, at least on paper, was extraordinary. When pre-registration opened for potential passengers, tens of thousands reportedly signed up. Some were history enthusiasts, others were drawn purely by the allure of walking through living history. Travel agencies predicted tickets would sell out instantly once officially released, but beyond the excitement, there was reflection. Maritime communities spoke of the emotional weight of the project. Building a ship called Titanic wasn't just engineering, it was storytelling on a colossal scale. Every decision, from hull color to interior decor, carried symbolic meaning. One designer put it best during an interview: "We could have built a new luxury liner with all the same features, but no one would care. People care because it's Titanic II. It's about closure, about finishing a sentence history left incomplete. The closure." That word echoed through every discussion about the ship. For some, it meant redemption for the White Star Line's legacy. For others, it meant giving peace to families whose ancestors never came home. For Palmer and his investors, closure might mean proving that the line between ambition and arrogance could finally be redrawn. Still, the public couldn't help but compare. Whenever Titanic II was mentioned, images of icebergs filled television screens. Commentators asked, would it follow the same route? Would there be enough lifeboats? The answer, of course, was yes, more than enough. Regulations demanded 100% capacity with redundancy, modern materials, and continuous monitoring. Yet even knowing that, something about the story triggered a collective shiver. Humans, after all, are wired for superstition. We find patterns in history, and the word Titanic carries its own mythology, a reminder of hubris and fate. As the ship's rendering spread across media, viewers couldn't decide what they felt: admiration, curiosity, or a quiet sense of unease. The sight of that familiar four-funnel silhouette slicing through a digital ocean stirred ghosts that had never quite rested. But perhaps that's exactly why Titanic II matters. It forces us to confront those ghosts, not with fear, but with fascination. It reminds us that history isn't just something we mourn, it's something we continually engage with, trying to understand, to fix, to humanize. And maybe, deep down, humanity's need to rebuild Titanic isn't about a ship at all. It's about our unrelenting desire to turn tragedy into testament, to prove that what once symbolized loss can someday represent progress. Somewhere in a design studio, a digital rendering zooms in on the grand staircase, sunlight streaming through stained glass, polished rails gleaming. It's just an image for now, but in that image lives a century of longing. The Titanic never truly sank. One historian mused in a documentary voiceover. It just changed form, and every generation since has tried to bring it back, piece by piece. Every generation inherits stories it can't quite let go of. The Titanic is one of those stories, a wound and a wonder combined. More than a shipwreck, it has become a mirror. When we talk about Titanic, we talk about ourselves, our ambition, our arrogance, our innocence, and our will to survive. The idea of rebuilding it, of letting the Titanic sail again, isn't just nostalgia. It's psychological archaeology. We're digging into the collective memory of humankind, unearthing the very moment when the modern world learned it wasn't invincible. And that's what makes Titanic II so powerful. It's not simply a ship project. It's an attempt to rewrite one of the defining moments of the 20th century through the lens of the 21st. Imagine the moment when the completed vessel is revealed for the first time. The same iconic bow slicing through calm water, the same graceful curve of the decks, the same golden lettering glinting against the sun, Titanic. Only now, behind that name, there's something different. Fiber optics, radar, sonar, GPS, fire suppression systems, and 21st century engineering precision down to the millimeter. It's a monument to progress disguised as a ghost from the past. When Titanic II eventually sails, the eyes of the world will follow it. Not out of morbid curiosity, but out of quiet reverence. Cameras will capture passengers boarding, dressed in period attire. Journalists will film the ship's departure from Southampton, the same port, the same route, but a century apart. Somewhere on the dock, someone will whisper, "She's finally going home." As the ship glides into open water, the world will hold its breath. The air will be heavy with memory, but also with pride. It will not be a voyage of luxury. It will be a voyage of redemption. In that moment, history won't be repeating itself. It will be continuing. But beyond the emotion, there lies a deeper truth about human nature. We rebuild because we can't stand unfinished stories. We rebuild because we believe that tragedy should never have the final word. Every bridge rebuilt after a collapse, every city restored after a disaster, every name remembered on a monument. These are all acts of defiance against time. Titanic II belongs to that same impulse. Its existence asks uncomfortable questions. Can technology conquer fate? Can remembrance coexist with reinvention? And is it ever truly possible to separate tribute from temptation? Even now, experts debate the ethics. Some argue that the Titanic should remain sacred, an untouchable symbol of human fallibility. Others insist that by rebuilding it, We pay it the ultimate respect, refusing to let it die as just a disaster. Both sides have merit. But one thing is certain. No matter where the Titanic story goes next, it will continue to shape how we define progress, pride, and humility. Deep beneath the North Atlantic, the original Titanic still rests in silence. Its steel has faded, its decks have collapsed, and its corridors are now home to marine life instead of music. But even in decay, it remains strangely alive in the human imagination. Now, a century later, a second Titanic prepares to rise, not to replace the first, but to remind us of it. The two ships, separated by time but bound by story, form a dialogue between past and future. One sank because humanity overestimated itself. The other exists because humanity learned. As the narrator's voice softens, we might hear faint echoes, an orchestra tuning in the distance, waves brushing against holes unseen. Some stories never sink. The voice might say, they wait for someone brave enough to sail them again. And perhaps that's what Titanic truly is, not a ship made of steel, but a promise made of memory. A promise that we will keep building, keep remembering, keep moving forward, even if the sea itself tries to stop us. When Titanic II finally leaves the harbor, somewhere out there, the ghosts of 1912 will be watching, not with anger, not with sorrow, but with quiet approval, because at last their story has found its conclusion. The screen fades to black. The sound of the ocean lingers. Then, a final line appears, Titanic II, coming soon. Soft orchestral music rises, and the voice returns one last time. This time we know what lies ahead. A fade out,